Good afternoon and welcome to tonight's dialogue. Hey, it has been a minute. We've been away to my I lost a dear aunt and was away for her services, and family came together, had a great time with family, and still adjusting this whole football thing. Football practice just kind of beat me up. So thanks to Madam Producer and her Go Get It Creation crew who have pulled together shows and done shows for us. We're so grateful. But we're back tonight live, and tonight in the co-pilot is my dear cousin Janis, Hazel. Jan, what's up?
Oh, all is well in the D, as we call it here in Detroit.
She's gonna
Finally
always
getting
hold the D up. Yeah, she's got the D. We got So Florida down here, and when Kim's on, he's got Duval on the wrap. So here, Janet, what's been going on with you? It's been a minute.
just as they say, keeping it real, looking at reparations around the country. I'm very glad that the state of California's reparations task force has committed to recommending, I think it's $1.5 million per African American whose lineage goes back to enslavement. And I think they have some other criteria, but I'm very glad that they've made that decision. I think it should be more, as we're talking over 100 years in that state and all of the harms that came out of enslavement. But I'm glad that that decision came out, that recommendation has come out. Now we have to see what the state of California will do. We know that San Francisco recommended more than $5 million to descendants of enslaved people in the San Francisco area and or other criteria, which are the harms and the de jure and de facto discrimination and discriminatory policies in housing, education, business contracting that have happened. And what gets me is that I've listened to some of the commentary from some Black residents in the state of California after those two decisions, chiefly the NAACP, which I think the president should be fired for stating that there should not be cash disbursements to people. I don't know why anyone would say that. Or let me say, I do know why, because the NAACP has been co-opted by taking money from white corporations to fund their events and their salaries. So that speaks for itself. But as you know, I've been appointed to the Detroit Reparations Task Force. So we are starting our process and have 18 months to do research and hear public comment, and I am looking forward to our process unfolding.
All right, awesome. I have been monitoring it from a distance. I'm an avid reader of newspapers, and I've been and also saw, of course, right wingers always. I think it was that crazy right wing outlet on TV that's been having all of these problems with their personnel. Showed some things, some clips from a meeting, and showed the worst parts of the meeting and tried to make fun of it. But more power, keep that up, keep that going. I'm glad to see, encouraged to see that's happening. That's being pushed forward. So, well, listen, you have helped to persuade me tonight. I left the experience in Winston-Salem with a greater, not that I've ever had any lesser appreciation for family, but a far greater awareness and appreciation for family. As Aunt Tricia kind of brought us together, and we had somewhat of a mini reunion at her celebration of life of our cousins. That's kind of was impressed upon me, the organized cousins and you and the California crew and some of the Winston crew have come together. We've organized, we've done virtual reunions, and you all celebrated Mama's 90th birthday. We've done a lot of stuff that we're grateful for. We just had a little contest. We'll talk about that later. But a celebration of family. So I came back just wanting to really talk about family. And I was in a doctoral program at Bethel Seminary up in Minneapolis, up in St. Paul. And my move and other things caused me, unfortunately, not to finish the program. And I can't put that on, that's on me. But I was dealing with my area was my area of concentration was family ministry. And I would have been able to hang out a shingle as a family therapist upon getting licensed in whatever state I had taken that doctorate had I finished it. Hey, Curtis. Hey, brother. How you doing? Welcome back with us. Uh, but it just gave me an innate, my exposure in those 3 years of intensive and the work that I had to go back and do just gave me a greater awareness and to have a larger scope of what family was. And the experience a few weeks ago just really gave me an awesome appreciation for family. So thank you for keeping us focused on the night show to make it about family. And I think I kind of want to open with saying that there are all kinds of family. There are all kinds of family. There's blended families. There are fictive kinship, adopted families. There are, of course, nuclear families, blood families. What has been your experience with the variety of family types, Jan?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because on many levels, we're born into a bloodline, we're born into families, and on many levels, many occasions, I have come to understand that even though you're related to someone, be it siblings, be it a parent, being it cousins or other extended relatives, doesn't mean that you're always in sync with that person or those people just because of a bloodline. And I have come to find, having lived in other places away from my immediate family, that I made great friendships, and what I consider family bonds and ties with the people that I was kindred spirits with. Numerous girlfriends, male friends who were friends of mine from Detroit. In Washington, D.C., we had a Detroit club. And really, I found that I stayed with my Detroit friends more so than those that I was meeting in Washington, D.C. from all over the country or all over the world. There just seemed to be a connectedness that we had. I did have girlfriends and guy friends from Washington, D.C., very few, very, very few, and from other places, New York, California, outside of the country. But I've come to understand that just because you're related to someone doesn't mean you're going to have a bond with them. And that I've also come to understand and practice what Aunt Patricia, may she rest in peace, who just transitioned to the land of ancestors last month, is she used to always say she was in her peace bubble. She was protecting her peace. And when I was younger, I don't know, I guess I didn't really pay that much attention to it. But as a grown woman now, I protect my peace. And there are family members that I have to stay away from in order to protect my peace and stay in my peace bubble. So I'll start with that.
So we're gonna get to that. That's a real. That goes beyond family, and we're gonna talk about family members that we to stay at peace. We keep distance in between, and how to do that appropriately. And I'm glad you mentioned the wide range of families, because all family is not blood. I've heard this, and I don't know. I'm close. I'm not a member of a sorority. Definitely not a sorority. I'm not a member of a fraternity. I would have doing that black and gold had I done that, but I made a decision late in life. I didn't do that, so I didn't have that. But I've been in athletics all my life. But probably outside of my wife and our 3 kids and grandkids and families, the closest to a group like that has been my brothers, Kim and Anthony. We remember we call ourselves the V3, and that's a tight bond for us. And I know it's 3 of you guys, but that's a very, very tight bond. Now, does that mean we always see eye to eye? We always agree on stuff? We always every legal thing, every business decision? We all know absolutely not. But at the end of the day, people better think twice about trying to barge in on any of the 3 of us. That's just the closest that we have, not insinuating violence or nothing like that. We're just a closely bonded family. But when I was doing that doctorate, and I think what what really pressed me to really have an affinity for different types of families. We were at that time we had a young lady that was kind of living with us, and even when we transitioned to Florida, she lived with us in Illinois probably a year or so. She just said she wanted to be in the environment, wanted to be in our home environment to finish her last year of school, I think it was. And then when we moved down, she stayed with us for about 6 or 8 months, if I'm correct. And so that fictive kinship adoption was just a big thing for me. And I know a lot of people who had no family, and being and associating with the family and adopting mother and father, or this is my brother. I know that's a strong, strong bond. And I know my girls, and even those, even though she was close to the girls, Madam Producer, you can weigh in on this. There was a bond, and they consider her sister to these days. So I think the outside of the bloodline, I think we need to. That's something we want to talk. Listen, we got Mia on, and I don't want to hold her, but I do want to talk to her. Mia is our dear cousin out of Winston-Salem, and let's bring her on because Mia has an interesting perspective because she's an only child. So we want to kind of talk about some of those issues and what the value of fraternities and sororities and those kinds of things. Mia, how you doing, sis?
Hi, I'm doing well. I hope you are.
We're great. You see that fabulous cousin of yours over
I
there?
do. Hi, Janice.
Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. You guys look great.
Thanks. Mia, we're going to kind of talk about a couple of weeks ago shortly, but I kind of wanted you, since we got you tonight, would you kind of talk about what it's like growing up? And I know, you grew up with your cousins were almost like sisters and stuff. What is it like growing up in that family structure and being an only child?
For me, I believe it was the best of both worlds because I had the luxury of having very, very close cousins who are truly like my siblings here in Winston. And I also had the opportunity to um, be alone, as an only child during the week while in school that I enjoyed also. So it's a very interesting dynamic in that I have, all of you, all of my cousins all over the country that I feel very close to in very different ways. And even though I'm an only child, I never really felt like an only child. And I'm told often, people are really surprised to find out that I am. I don't know what only children act like, but apparently I don't fit the mold. And I think that's probably because I was raised with my cousins who are like siblings, and I don't have any problem sharing. I don't have any problems giving, which I guess are all indicators of only children having those problems. And I know that's because of the way, that's because of my upbringing, from my mother, who was a very giving person. And I certainly inherited that trait. So I'm thankful for that. But, and we'll probably get more into it to think about, as Janice was talking about, those relationships that are like family, that are beyond your bloodline. I have found that most of my dearest friends from childhood are also only children.
Wow.
Which we realized later on in life. So I don't know if that connection just drew us closer to develop those friendships. But I don't know. I honestly, I am an only child, and I know that biologically I am, but I don't feel isolated. I don't feel siloed. I certainly feel like part of a family. I feel like I'm a sibling. I feel like I'm the sister that you guys never had, Dozell.
You know
I
that.
do.
You know that.
Um,
I know Kim probably thinks he has exclusivity to you as a sister,
yes,
but you are all
yes,
three of our sister.
absolutely. And just the fact that I had an opportunity to go to Detroit, as a kid with my cousins and come to Florida and go to Cal. I just had made all these amazing connections growing up that really has impacted the relationships that I now have with my cousins who that I absolutely value even more so now.
Jen? Jen, we're in with your cousin.
Oh, absolutely. Not seeing this side of the family all the time because most of them were in either North Carolina or in Florida or in California. And of course, myself and my two siblings growing up in Detroit, I found that I got more of a bond as I got older, as an adult, by traveling, by going to the family reunions and learning more about each other before the internet and before social media and the texting and all of that. Coming down to the family reunions and staying at Mia's house and seeing the girls grow up into beautiful young women, seeing her husband. I went to the Democratic National convention in 2012, going and seeing our other cousins in Charlotte, and that was wonderful. And then you, Dozell, the threesome, the Three Musketeers, you and your two brothers coming to Washington, D.C. as adults, and that was possibly one of the best times that I've ever had. Just you all are so funny.
Yes,
And
they are.
touring you around Washington. It was so funny when you said, well, because you were there for your father to receive the was it the Congressional or the Presidential Medal of Honor?
It was congressional.
Congressional Medal of Honor during President Obama's administration for being one of the first Blacks to integrate the Marines and during World War II. And so you said, well, we have a limited amount of time, but we want to do some sightseeing. And you were flipping through, I don't know, I guess a Google search to find a tour company. And I said, duh, I've lived here well over 20 years. I can tour you around. And that began such a fun journey. It was amazing. So as an adult, I think I've become much more closer to this side of the family. My mother's side of the family, there were more of her relatives living in Detroit, coming out of Alabama. And I had 5 cousins that I grew up with. The 3 older ones, 10 years older than myself, 8 years older than myself, 4 years older than myself, were our babysitters, right? And then the other 2, one was the same age as my brother and the other was the same age as myself. And so we were always over at that aunt's house, or the older children of that family were our babysitters. And in fact, they called it Peter and Janis sitting because it was an experience unlike any other that
I'm sure.
they experienced. And so like Mia, she is a member of a sorority. I am a member of a sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, and Mia is a member of Delta Sigma Theta. And
she's wearing Alpha, AKA colors right now.
This is just a coincidence.
I look good in
for me,
everything.
but yeah,
you do, cuz.
every lady wants to be an AKA. So
I beg to differ, but we're not going. That's another segment.
But Jen, Jen, you just brought up something, and that is, and we definitely, as long as I know Mia is limited with her time, but as long as she's here, we want to cash in on it before we really talk a little bit about the last couple of weeks. The balance, you talked about both sides and being closer. Now, it's funny. We lived in Jacksonville. My dad's mother lived next door to us, and 3 houses down lived my aunt and my cousins, all of my other cousins. Then Big Dozell, he got married and moved down the street. He was like close to a brother I had. He moves 2 houses down. So you could have really named that Varner Street or whatever. But I find myself now living away from home. All the neat things that the Hazel cousins are doing, and we're going to share some of them with our group in a second. But I'm saying, I got to bring some of that to the other side of the family. I'm the oldest of our group, and I'm probably in the middle of the Varner side. But another cousin and I have kind of been the nucleus and kind of doing some things. So we got to bring some of those things together. And that's a balance, I think, that you have to walk. Do you have that balance? Any of you guys have a problem weighing that balance with both sides of your families like that?
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, there's our families, I think, but were large, based on, the early 1900s, and through the mid, I guess about the 30s, 1930s, when our aunts and uncles, our parents were born. And so there were 9 siblings on my mother's side of the family. And she was, towards the younger. She was the second to the youngest, and her younger brother is 10 years younger than she. And then on, of course, my father's side, this side of the family, there are 8 siblings. And so they, of course, all branched out and had children. And it's, again, because I grew up with cousins on my mother's side of the family here in Detroit, I was closer to them because I saw them all the time. The
That
ones
was
that were my age, as well as the ones who were babysitters. And there were others who were older because, of course, my mother being one of the younger children, all of her nieces and nephews were older. Her siblings had children, 20 and 30 years before her, some of them. So some of my cousins are, 20, 30 years older than myself. And I think well, my sister is the youngest of our cousins on my mother's side,
so,
and my sister is the youngest of the first cousins on my father's side. On this side, yeah,
okay.
she would
Oh,
be the
this
youngest
is
also.
okay, okay. Let
Yeah.
me let me ask me. I think professionally, and
Mhm.
we've never really talked about this, but don't you do a little social work? Aren't you a school, more or less a school social worker?
I work in, yes, so the family engagement piece, if you will, in the school district.
What are some universal problems that we see in the family structure? Because you are right there in the midst. I deal with it in ministry, but my
Mhm.
ministry is kind of winding down, and I can give a myriad of observations. But what's some of the things you're seeing in 2023? It's a different year, Jan. It's a different generation.
It is. And what I see most is that this generation of parents, if you will, younger parents, do not have the types of relationships with siblings and cousins that we have. And I say that because whenever we are identifying family members to support children, normally there isn't anyone, maybe a mother, and or a father. Siblings are not always the first ones that parents put down as points of contact. They are more apt to use a friend or neighbor. So I see that the younger generation of parents are more disconnected, in my professional opinion. And I always ask, who else, is there anyone else we need to have at the table when we're having parent teacher conferences, or when decisions need to be made about a student? And, their circles, their spheres of influence is very small, compared to what I knew growing up in terms of an extended family. And I don't know, as Janice was stating earlier, it's because maybe the family dynamic, well, I know the family dynamic is different in terms of who's raising children now, but also the number of members in a family isn't as big as it was when our parents had 8 siblings or 9 siblings. So I don't see that they have that same pool of people, if you will, to pull from for support. The way, and I can only speak to my personal experience, the way I felt support just, in this last month or so. So I do see a difference there in terms of just the family structure as we know it, if you will.
So Jan, I did a little. You held me to the topic, so I didn't really. I did a little research on the, and we'll talk a little bit later about family life cycle. But um, one of the things, and Mia hit on it, was the one of the real importances of family is support structure. And and so my research also says that structure is not maybe so much as who's there, but what you do and how you spend that time. What does structure mean to you, Jan, growing up? Family structure.
Oh, well, my mother was a very strict disciplinarian, very authoritative. um, but the
What,
structure
what
for,
about Uncle Charles?
oh, no, my father was easy breezy. He was real chilled. Um,
Really?
He was very, very chilled out. In fact, he called my mother, which, my father served in the Korean War. He called my mother by a number of militaristic terms: the general, the captain,
Wow.
sergeant. He would salute her, because she just had an air of authority, and you just didn't buck her. So she was the disciplinarian, and he was, real chilled. But the structure, my mother's a social worker also. She worked for the state of
Oh, okay.
Michigan, and she worked early on in her career in juvenile court systems. So she was dealing with children and families that were being becoming a part of the legal system, and not in a good way, if you will. And so I think that colored a lot of the way that she interacted with us and then the children in her life. She absolutely loved children. And so we were involved in a lot of activities because she knew that children, if they were not involved in positive activities, then she would see them in court, juvenile court, in some kind of way. And she didn't want that. So a lot of her network and friends were sheriffs for our county, Wayne County sheriffs, police officers. And before the police department had the PAL, the Police Athletic League, we were involved in Little League football and cheerleading. So I started out in gymnastics, always going to the YWCA, and then spiraled over to cheerleading with the Little League football team. My brother played football for the Little League football team. Then, of course, going on to high school athletics, basketball, volleyball, debate team. My brother, football from Pee Wee or Little League from the age of 8 all the way through high school. And then I got involved with she had me involved with the youth auxiliary of the sorority. And so with that, I was traveling around the country, outside the country. So she was very, very concerned about having us in activities to enlarge in our life and give us just appreciation of the arts and things of that nature. And she did that with other children in our community. My mother was one of the people who lobbied effectively to get the boys club to become boys and girls club in our community. And then I think that spread throughout the United States because my mother said, boys have sisters. So what are we going to do with the sisters when the boys are at the boys club? So our boys club, which was in walking distance, we had all kinds of activities. We were latchkey children. So after school, you went to boys club or you went to football practice or cheerleading practice or gymnastics practice. And my mother also took children in the neighborhood who were not, I believe, as fortunate to have a 2-parent household, like a boy next door, single parent household, being raised by grandparents. So my mother always involved other children in the neighborhood to be involved in all these activities, because again, she knew if they weren't actively involved in activities to strengthen their character, to broaden their horizon, and to keep them busy and engaged, she was going to see them in juvenile court, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the type of structure. When I think of it, it was a community structure. We could only ride our bikes a certain, part of the street. You had to turn around, and if you went past that, you get in trouble. We were outside of the house during that latchkey time between the time my father left and my mother got home. So my father worked afternoons. All eyes were on you. And, people in the neighborhood, they were very, very open about disciplining you. And there was no problem because it was a community structure, which I don't see as much today, or really in the last 20 years, 20, 30 years of a community really wrapping their arms around children. So it's not just the family structure, it is the extended family, I believe, which is the neighborhood and the broader community.
The village. Village that we talked about.
Everybody engaged. Yeah.
So, well, we're going to take this break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the things that has broken down the family, particularly our families, and to see what our solutions is biblical prophecy just playing out in this no turnaround, or can we do a timeout with some of the craziness that's going on? We're going to come back with that right after this break. Mia, we're going to let you go in a second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Latoya, Markia and family, that's who compromises. Go Giga Creations, GoGigaWorld.com. You see how they make this boy look. My fabulous cousins, they don't need their help, but I need all the help I can get to make this thing happen. They got all of your virtual needs, websiting, all of that. The pandemic may be over, but this virtual thing is here to stay. Contact them and let them make you look good also. That's more Giga, GoGigaWorld.com. They got you hooked up. Usually at this point in the show, we do, are you kidding? Are you serious? Or dang dog? Or we do a shout out. But tonight I want to do something special, and I've been holding this one. We want to dedicate this show to the dear memory of Mia's mother and our dear auntie, Patricia Hazel Broom. And just keep that picture up, Madam Producer. I could have gone to Mia and gotten another picture, a different picture, but this is a picture of her on the, that's the Orange Line, Jan. That's the Washington, D.C. Subway. Excuse me, as we were going into the city to do the African American Cultural Museum. And that was the joy she had of being on the subway and anticipating what we were about to see. That was an awesome trip that I got to take with my auntie and my mother. And that's how I will remember her. But I will remember her far greater than that. I was just like a baby when she was real young. And she used to come to Florida every year and babysit we three knuckleheads and just come down and spend that summer with my mother, her sister, and my dad would have her hooked up in positions with the city and for summer. And that was part of our summers. Aunt Tricia was always coming down to Jacksonville, and we were going to hang out together and have a great time. We always took a little short trip, and we always went to the beach, Mia. We know that's why you're a swimmer today, why you like the water, because we always went to the beach. And, we grew up, we moved away, we saw each other lesser and lesser. But it was the joy of my life to be connected with my dear auntie that I could just pick up the phone once every 2 or 3 months and out of the clear and call her and she not say, "What you want? What's up? What's going on?" She did always say to me, "Is my sister all right?" "Yes, ma'am." Because if there's anything ever going on, you make sure I'm the first to call. And I was going to always do that, auntie. The thing that I'll take to my resting place is the discipline she had in her spirituality at the end. That twice a day she took time out to for meditations, and I knew not to disturb her during those times. If it was anywhere around those times, I knew not to call, or I knew what number to call and leave a voice message. So a few weeks ago, we kissed her into eternity. But her indelible love, her giving that was accentuated during her services, and that smile that you see will always be loved and appreciated. We love you, auntie. God bless, and thank you for making all our lives better.
That's just I have no words. That really touches my heart because she was a very unique woman. And I knew every facet of her. I knew every facet. I knew the good, the bad, and the ugly as my mother. And I cannot even convey to you all the impact that she has had on my life in such a profound, positive way. And as you were saying, Dozell, the discipline that she had with her Bible study was second to none. And, just going by her house, anywhere you look, there is scripture. There were a couple of purses. She loved Brahmin bags. That was her purse of choice. So in honor of her, the girls and I each had one of her bags at her funeral, and my bag had a little. Do you guys remember? Actually, I have it here. I'll show it to you. The little Bible. Here it is.
Okay.
And it is so small. I mean, it's in the palm of my hand. And this is what she had in her bags. And she has written in her mini Bible. I don't think you guys can see that, but she has handwritten the dates that she had read these scriptures.
Oh,
And
wow.
so you see this throughout just everything that she had. I mean, she was such a spiritual woman. And to know where my mother came from, and the way the Lord worked on her, and to know that she never lost her spirituality is special to me. You know, even when she was quote unquote, and these are her words, doing her thing, she made sure that I went to church. And Dozell, I don't know if you remember, but I know Anna Manil will remember Mr. Keel. He was a family friend for years. And when I was a child, she would have him come pick me up and several other kids in the neighborhood and take us to Reynolds Temple on Sundays, because he was an avid church member. And though she wasn't physically in the church at the time, she knew the value of me going as a child. And, as her life progressed and she came back to the Lord in the way in which she was raised, my kids got to see a side of her as Gaga that was completely different from what I saw as a mother. And I am forever grateful for that and thankful that they had the experience and the opportunity to know her in the way in which they knew her. She was a beautiful, beautiful spirit, and she surely touched all of our lives in very different but special ways. And Janis, to speak to your point about the peace bubble, that was her saying. Anyone that knew her knew that. And I think part of me, as we were talking earlier about being an only child, I find myself going into my peace bubble. When I feel like I am overstimulated, if you will, by other people, I will go to that place of peace where there is solitude, because Mama taught me how to do that, and that it was okay to do that. Really, just to recharge yourself. So again, just so many wonderful memories that I am in such a place of peace, even though her passing is so recent. And part of that, Janice, you shared with me something that I didn't even know about Aunt Gladys. And to carry a burden as heavy as I carried and as you carried, being committed and loyal to our mothers in terms of their illness, and holding that close to our hearts for so many years, because they wanted to be remembered in life, how they lived life. I didn't understand it at the time, but I completely get it now. I completely get it. And I'm thankful to have been on that journey, and can be assured that she is truly resting in peace. And that gives me joy.
Mia, can you? I mean, and I know this is some of it is personal, but since you
Yeah.
alluded to it, can you kind of just let the Dialogue family know what you meant by that about kind of the security that both of your mothers required during their illnesses? Could you elaborate on that in your own way?
Absolutely. So my mother was diagnosed initially with breast cancer in 2014, 9 years ago. And she immediately vowed me to secrecy. Immediately. She said, "You are not to tell anyone. If you tell anyone about this illness, and me and you are going to have problems." And I did not want to have any problems with my mother. Trust me when I tell you, Janice, she was a she was very easy to get along with, but I knew when she meant business. And I knew she meant that. And I knew that I would never betray her trust, because she was all that I had. And I knew that I was all that she had. Right. So we went through a round of chemo. We went through radiation. Her only concern was losing her hair. She never lost her hair.
Mm.
So she was able to mask her illness because she didn't lose her hair. So that was in 14 and 15. 17, she was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. So we started the journey again. We went through 2 rounds of chemo on 2 separate occasions. We went through radiation, which collapsed her lung, one lung. So she had been functioning with just the right lung from 18 until her passing, which the doctors just found miraculous. And she would always tell the doctors, they say, well, Miss Broom, this is where we are. And she says, well, I know what you say, and I know what God says, and I believe in miracles, and I'm not concerned. She would just tell them straight up about what you're saying. So we went through, again, 2 more rounds of chemo, and she really defied the odds for her age. She was 76 when she passed. She had lived really longer than her quote unquote life expectancy for the type of cancer in which she had. And she was hospitalized only 5 days before her passing. So she was completely self-sufficient. We knew, my daughters and I knew that, her health was declining because she was having difficulty breathing, catching her breath, but her oxygen levels were still at 98 and 100%, which I still don't understand that, how that worked, but that's how it was. And I knew she was ready. I knew that she was ready. And I asked her the day before, she was writing her bills out. I believe I sent a picture out to the
Amazing.
cousins through
Amazing.
text.
Amazing.
On Monday, she was sitting up in her bed and she said, go home, get my checkbook, because I never pay my bills late. I pay my bills the day that they come. Bring me whatever bills are there. Bring my checkbook, and I need you to carry my bills, because she did not have a smartphone, as we know, and she did not pay anything online. So of course I obeyed, and I took a picture of her in ICU sitting up writing out her bills on Monday, April 10th, and she passed at 7:10 on Wednesday, April 12th. So just an amazingly strong woman who died with dignity, who told me often that she never heard our grandmother complain whenever she was diagnosed with cancer. She said, my mother never complained. She talked about the needle that she saw them stick in our grandmother's back, and how experiencing all of that, that she never heard one complaint from our grandmother. So I really know that she pulled her strength from her own mother. And she died with dignity the way that she wanted to do it.
So
It was pretty amazing.
Jan, to give you a little facts with this, and I definitely would make light of. I think Trisha's strength came through Mia, and it was the strength of all of us during that week we were together. And only Trisha could have brought us together to have an awesome week like we had.
Absolutely.
But, Mia did not tell us that her mother was ill until she was assured that she was pretty much not going to be talking again.
Until her organs were shutting down, because I was afraid to tell.
I was actually sitting at the Mercedes store getting my car serviced to grab Mama so that we could try to get up there when Mia called and told us that we would be planning a service. So that was just. Now let's look at something. Thank you for sharing. I just wanted you to just tell the secrets here. I didn't, but thank you for sharing everything. What did, and Jan already talked about about how supportive the family structure was and the whole rap service of the community, but just tell of the support that you felt during that week, because it helped me. It was my auntie, but it even helped me to keep my head up. The support that I saw you getting.
It was amazing. I did not realize, and I'm sure you can attest to this also, Janice, as you too, Dozell, with losing Uncle Dozell, the people that my mother had touched, the lives that she had impacted until her passing. When I started receiving the phone calls and I started receiving cards from people that I don't know who they are, but some of them were former colleagues, neighbors, who all talked about how she impacted their lives, right? And so when she transitioned, uh, and the first group of people that came immediately were my friends. Now, when we talked about family, all not being a bloodline earlier, that was my non-bloodline family that immediately came. And so sorority sisters, college friends, just everyone. And they were there to do everything that I couldn't even focus well enough to do. And then our family started arriving, and I was completely overwhelmed with the love and support that I got from my cousins. Again, I look at you guys as my siblings, right? And the way that it was like, no question, if I can be there, I'm going to be there. And you guys came, you showed up, you supported me in such a way that I just felt completely covered. I mean, completely covered with love. And then the only thing I could think was, this would make Mama so proud, because she always talked about how much she loved her nieces and her nephews. She loved you guys. And to have as many of you come as you did was just a blessing to me. And I know she would have been completely overjoyed. So the support, and even today, I mean, she passed April 12th, and I know it's still not been a long time, but people are still calling and checking in and making sure that we're good. And I just can't, I didn't understand when people lost parents specifically, what that was like. You don't know what things are like until you actually go through them yourself, right? And so I would express my condolences when coworkers and friends lost family members. But to go through it, I have a completely different understanding and respect for the level of support that people need at a time like this. And I received it, and I'm so thankful and grateful for it.
Well, we love you and appreciate you. Jan, we got just a few minutes, but kind of talk about this cousin bond and some of the things that we do. There's a whole lot of stuff that's not going to make it into tonight's show. We'll do another part. Mia, you'll get us, because we didn't intend to hold you captive the entire show.
No. I appreciate you guys letting me talk and being here. I'm
We
good.
appreciate you. I mean, wholehearted. I mean, your candor and your transparency is just greatly appreciated. Jan, just share with our audience some of the stuff that we do as cousins, and from the reunions to the text line and the recent contest. Just share and throw it out there so it'll be something maybe some families can do.
Well, I would be remiss not to speak on this part of the family. As I mentioned earlier, there's bloodlines of family, and then there are those friends that become your family, particularly if you don't live where you grew up. And I lived in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. So a lot of the people that I came to know there became my family, either at church or sorority sisters, or those people who were from Detroit, because we had likeness. And I don't think that the Hazel side of my family don't know as much as my mother's side of the family, because many of them are here in Detroit. But my siblings and we don't have the type of bond that I do with some of my cousins or others. Some of that, for instance, with my sister, who's 10 years younger than I am, I have a more maternal relationship with her because I had to take care of her as a child. My brother, who's older than I am, we have a relationship that is best kept at a distance. And I will say, when going through my parents' transitions, my older cousins who were here before the Hazel side got here, the ones that lived here, it was a lot like a Tyler Perry movie, shall I say. And I have become Uncle Sam. And so for the Hazel family who knows and loves Uncle Sam, I have become Uncle Sam. with no filter, with just kind of being myself. I try to hold my tongue a little bit on some things, but I'm really transparent. And I have come to realize just because I'm related to some people doesn't mean that I have to have a relationship with them. And that's part of protecting my peace and being in my peace bubble, which Patricia, we had a number of conversations about that. And like I said, the older I get, I understand it more and practice it. The support, I was so appreciative of both sides of my family, first cousins to come to Detroit and wrap their arms around us. And I'll even say that the bonds of family can be so strong even when when you're not around them that much. I think the seeds that you plant early on, and in this instance, I'm talking about my nephew, my oldest nephew in California, my brother's child, who did not really get to know his grandmother. Only met her one time when he was 15, but he was 20 when she was ill and declining. And I asked him if he would come. Of course, I paid for everything, but I needed someone here at the house to help with all of the caregivers. And this is a child that I'd known since birth because I was always going to California, and that bond remained. And he came, even he had things going on in his life, but he came to be with his grandmother. And in that short period of time that he was here, interacting with all the caregivers and interacting with her, he said he just wished he had gotten to know her more. And what's funny is because my mother was so authoritative, even in her decline, even when she couldn't speak, just her eye gestures would make you fearful. So as you said, Mia, your mother swore you to secrecy about her illness. My mother did the same thing. A lot of family members did not know. She definitely didn't want the broader community to know as she declined. And I had to, be at peace with her wishes. But I did tell like her good girlfriends of 50 years, I did not want her to leave and them not have a chance to see her. And so they did. And she was pissed off with me. There were times when she wouldn't even let me into the hospital room. And I was like, okay. There were times that she said some very, very terse words to me. And okay, I dealt with that. And so I appreciate my cousins who were here through that, as well as my cousins who were not here, but who came upon her transition and my father's transition. And I think it's because of the seeds that were planted early on, even though we didn't see each other all the time. You called and said a prayer with us, even though you weren't here physically. And I appreciate that. That was really wonderful. So I've just learned a lot. And, in homage to Aunt Patricia, we had a lot of evening phone calls through the years, and she told me a lot of things, and that protecting your peace from toxicity, whether it is a sibling or cousin, if it's a relative, you have to protect your peace. And I'm in my peace bubble, away from anything and anyone who is toxic. And I appreciate her for imparting that wisdom on me. And I will say, and if we were to do another segment, I have relatives that have made me physically ill. And I do mean physically ill, having to go to specialists because I cared so much about them and to try to help them. But because the way that they structured their life and the way they handle business was so different from the way I do, I honestly was going to see neurologists, ear, nose, and throat, dermatologists, because the stress on my body was more than even when my parents were ill, because I could manage everything. I had control. So I would just say to people, anyone who might be listening, is to protect your peace away from anyone, be they a family member or someone outside, because it can affect your physical health as well as your emotional health.
So I'm trying not to laugh because you're really hitting home with that. When we do another thing on the family, we're gonna we haven't talked about it, but Mia will be retiring in probably less than 30 days.
All right.
Yeah,
Welcome
amen.
Club.
So, yes. So when we do this again, and we're going to do this show again, we're going to talk about how do you deal with Ray Ray and your family, because we all got them in our families.
With what?
How do you deal with Ray Ray? You're giving us some good suggestions. How do we deal with the Ray Rays in our family, or the
Stay away from them.
In our,
You stay away from them. I've learned that.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
Mia, before we go out, what I'd like for you to do is talk about that text line and the bond that we have and some of the things in the most recent content. I think that's a happy note we can go out on. We got about 2 minutes. Kind of hit on that, if you would, please.
Absolutely. So we started a cousin text with the first cousins. I don't know. I actually think it started a couple of years ago when I may have reached out to you guys and say, hey, can y'all wish my mom a happy birthday? I can't remember. I do remember having that conversation. And it may have come out of COVID, Dozell.
I think when we were thinking about the reunions that we had.
Maybe that's what it was. Yes. And so we started this line of communication via text for all of the first cousins. And I believe everyone is on with the exception of one. And that's Tunde, because she doesn't have a phone that can accommodate the text messaging. And it has turned into some very interesting dialogue over the last couple of years. And I absolutely enjoy it. I love it. I love the pictures. Dozell had mentioned the contest. So Peter, Janis's older brother, suggested, I believe it was last week, that we all send a picture, send our latest pictures. And then he had Paul, who is another cousin, select who Paul thought was the best picture. Now, I do believe that was biased, but that's a whole nother segment. But Paul,
I don't disagree with you, Mia.
I think it was biased, and he made a selection, which was one of my favorite cousins, Kim, and it was all in fun. And
the co-host of this program, Kim Varner.
Yes, and so I find that it's a good place of comic relief, if you will, for me on many occasions, just because I love the dialogue that we have amongst ourselves. And these are cousins from all over the country. So that is one good way to stay connected with family members in a very quick, efficient way. And I just enjoy our text line.
Well, so think of that times two, because I think it's about 16 on this side of the family.
Other,
and on my other side of the family, it's about 17 or 18 on a text thread. And so those things can be popping all day.
Yeah. And that is the thing. We do have to be mindful when we have cousins on the West Coast that, are 3 hours behind, and cousins where we have a couple of cousins that work third shift. So, sometimes it's not always good to hit it right for everyone. And then when you are working and you have those constant bings coming through, I just keep my phone on silent. So
that's how you have to do it.
Yeah.
Jan, we're going to be calling on you pretty soon. So the way we do it, we're basically, our Hazel side of the family is basically based out of Florida, North Carolina, Detroit, and California. Or the West Coast, because Peter's, I think, kind of back and forth through Vegas. But when we do our reunions, and what we agreed to do, Dialogue family, is that this summer we're doing another virtual reunion, because most of us were just together. We're doing a virtual reunion around the second Sunday in the second week in August, so we can be consistent. And then, so Jan she put together all these awesome contests, all of this historical nature that gave us value. Gave us what some of the traditions of our family and the history of it. It was awesome. So we're going to pull that together this year. And I know, Jan, you say you don't do cruises. Maybe you'll just have to be there when we leave and kiss us by it. Be there when we come back, because we don't know where. That's another. I think that's the West Coast group is kind of pulling it together next year. And I got to go and talk to Ms. Wendy about that. We haven't discussed that yet. That time is when we usually join my birthday and our anniversary cruise, but we're going to blend that in there. Next summer, the Hazel family cousins are doing a cruise together. And I did want to say this before we get out of here. My mother is the matriarch of the family, and she'll get me for this, but she's been around the sun about 92, almost 93 times. I cannot tell you how it's just the love we have for each other, how grateful I was to see how you all treasured her when we were together. And that process really started on her 90th birthday, how everybody stuck around. It was COVID. We had the counselor reunion. My brothers and I still went over to Orlando for the reunion. We did it virtually. And you all were all there for her 90th birthday, and the way you just pampered her, and we'll never forget that. And she's watching, so we're just so grateful.
I love it, and we love her. We love Anna Manil.
That's all the obvious. Anybody got any closing remarks you can do in like 25, 30 seconds before we get out of here? Keep the producer off for me. I'm a couple minutes over.
I just, want to say I appreciate this opportunity to talk about family, specifically ours, and how family is truly everything. We can rescind when we need to. We can engage when we want to. And that's the beautiful thing. And like you said earlier, Janis, at the end of the day, the bond is so deep and so strong that nothing matters other than we know we're family. And I appreciate that.
Amen.
Well, I will say, I ditto. I co-sign what you said, that's for sure, with a caveat, because I have to protect my peace. Anyone can get virtually anything from me, be it an organ, if I can be a donor, bone marrow, whatever that might be. But if I donate that organ, just don't put me in the same recovery room with certain people. Because if they say something that pisses me off, I might rip it out of them.
You're coming back for your organ.
Again, I got to protect my peace. And so I will just say that.
But you have a giving heart. We hear that.
How awesome. How awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks, ladies, for joining us tonight. Janis, you're a regular co-host is here with us. Mia, we are so grateful to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, just so sensitive to the timing, but thank you for your candor. And we know that somebody's being blessed by you.
Well, I appreciate that. For me, it's healing. Healing comes from talking about it. And I appreciate the opportunity. I really do.
Amen. Thank you, ma'am. Listen, as I see it, number one, I'm blessed to be a part of this dynamic family and these dynamic cousins. And we come from a lineage of dynamic grandparents and dynamic parents. And that we have bonded, and our bond is that of closer than cousins. We will always be grateful. But one thing we understand, and this is theological, if you would. I hear people say family is everything. We already got. It's not quite true. We take this nucleus that we have, this bond, and we expand it to make humanity better and to make the world a better place. And it kind of reminds us, even as a family, it's not an individual thing. It's like the song which says, reach out and touch somebody's hand, make this world a better place as we can, if we can. Listen, everybody won't have the joy of this family or a family like ours, but it's because of the dynamics in our family that we reach out and make a difference in the world. That's how I see it. God bless you. The dialogue will be back on next Monday night. We'll be fresh with a fresh new topic. Hopefully, some of the obligations has got KV tied down. He'll be back. Dialogue with Dozell. We're out. We thank you for being a part of our dialogue family. God bless.